You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into our Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks basketball talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra. Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com, our episode sponsor for tonight. FanDuel.com will get you started. The Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Hawks are looking for another W at the midpoint of their 6-game road trip. We'll talk about why that didn't quite happen, and the Hawks are the 1A and 1B for this team being overlooked. We'll discuss, but first, let's talk takes on the Hawks not doing the most in La La Land in their 119-102 loss to the Los Angeles Lakers tonight. And Tate, your take was pretty simple. The Hawks did just enough, except it wasn't enough.
Yeah, I had a hard time trying to figure out how exactly did I feel about this game. Like, it wasn't like disrespectful, but it wasn't really like I wasn't mad at them for the effort that they necessarily put up. But it just kind of felt like the Lakers needed this win a little bit more than Atlanta did, I guess. And it just seems like Atlanta didn't treat it like a must-win game. Like, if we don't do nothing else, we got to go out there. Like, it seems like they played the game. And I get the Lakers are, they are what they are in terms of just, the tradition and historic team and everything else that they are. You're playing one of the best players, if not the best player to ever play the game. But more so of the fact that, like, they didn't play it the way they would have played Boston. They didn't play it the way that they played New York. They didn't play it the way they played Cleveland and some of the other teams that look like they're really contending for titles. So that's kind of the issue that I had. I'm really glad, because we would have had a whole different type of feeling if they found a way in those last couple seconds to let Bronny James score. Definitely would have felt my own way about that. But no, I mean, some of just the little things that I was looking at in this game was just kind of like, to really nip the whole bully ball thing in the butt while you could. Felt like that was something that the Lakers was going to try and come out and do. So it's good to see the Hawks punch back. And I felt like they needed to be like immediately aggressive on Anthony Davis to kind of get into him a little bit, be physical, kind of have that no nonsense mindset with him. And kind of get him out of his game. That's something that didn't happen, but it's always a good night whenever you're, or a decent night anyways, could be worse whenever your random role player is not Bronny James or Cam Reddish for that matter.
Yeah, okay, so I got a couple questions for you.
No doubt.
Because I'm going to ask you to clarify a couple things before I say,
sure.
I don't know if I agree with you on that one. So let's start with this. The Lakers, you said they kind of played it like it was a must win, or the Hawks didn't play it like it was a must win. The Lakers kind of played it like they needed it more.
Mm-hmm.
But did they really need it more? Because they're like, that was their 20th win. They were already 19-14. So I just kind of wanted you to give me a little clarification on that one.
Well, just based off of who the Lakers are. Like, the Lakers hasn't looked like the Lakers team, granted 6 in the West, whatever, what have you. They've looked decent, but I don't feel like when you start looking at some of the other teams around the West where you don't have the John Morant for Memphis and you don't have the Kawhi Leonard for the Clippers and you don't have so many players over on that, with Luka and some of the other guys, some of those teams haven't really been all that healthy. Where for the most part, with the exception of a couple games from Anthony Davis, the Lakers have been, but they haven't really capitalized on it. And I think that they needed a game against a team where they could capitalize on that. And the Atlanta Hawks ended up being that team.
Got it. And then you were saying like it didn't kind of feel like, or the Hawks didn't approach it like it was a must win, but was it
a must win for the Hawks?
Yeah.
Not that it was, but I don't think that the Hawks is in a position where they can treat games like the one that they treated it on tonight. Like, I don't feel like I saw them sleepwalking, but I don't feel like I saw them putting forth the same kind of energy that they would against teams that are a little bit more not necessarily competitive, but just higher expectations than what we have of the Los Angeles Lakers. When you get a win against the Lakers, sometimes right, wrong, and different, I don't care what the roster is, a lot of times you get a win against them, it feels like those are 2 games that you won, and it's more of a confidence builder when you can walk around and say, I've got a sweep on the season against the Lakers. I think that they needed that a little bit.
Yeah, see, I don't think so. I think that when you're able to beat the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics, that to me is where you get the confidence. I don't think the Lakers have that luster anymore. A sweep absolutely has a luster. I don't care what team in the league it is.
Sure.
Absolutely agree with you on that one. If you could sweep any team in the association, that's a good look.
No,
but
no.
I think that it doesn't quite have that luster. Like, it's not a big deal to me that they lost to the Lakers. I'm like, okay, whatever. You beat the teams in the Eastern Conference who are ahead of you, those head-to-head matchups that could mean the difference between in terms of seeding later on in the season. Again, not saying any loss is a good loss or an okay loss, but to me, this one is just not, it doesn't rank up there with a loss maybe to any of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. Heck, probably honestly doesn't even ring true to me versus what they did against the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't see the Lakers in that space anymore, but I hear what you're saying as far as like the sweep part goes. But I also feel like, I don't know if it was so much that the Hawks didn't bring it tonight. I think that the referees brought it against them.
They did.
And I think that they did. The one thing I liked about it was they were more mature than we'd seen them in years past. In years past, that team would have just melted down as they noticed that calls weren't going in their favor, whether it was calls against them that they felt were like incorrect calls, or whether they just felt like flat out we're not getting as many calls as, say, the other team. But so I do feel like they were mature. I give them a shout out for that. But I don't think it's necessarily their fault, especially in the first half. It was like, you guys mind blowing a whistle every
now and then?
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe every 5 fouls. Can you call that in the Hawks' favor? So I think that was a tough one for them. That wasn't necessarily their fault. And, unfortunately for them, they shot under 18% from 3. Like, you're not winning a game in the NBA this season these days, especially if the other team is shooting at a 43% clip. So I think that was just one of those nights where you couldn't get a Garrison Matthews to get hot. He's kind of cooled off the last couple games. I'm not sure DeAndre Hunter was actually in the arena. Saw a jersey that said 12, but I'm really not sure that guy was in the arena in that jersey. I'm not sure who the heck that was. And, Bogdanovic didn't really give the team anything from 3 as well. So I think when all your guys who could potentially be sharpshooters and give you something from the land of 3, including Trae Young himself, and you don't get it, it's kind of hard when that other team is actually, at one point, they were even shooting 52% from the clip. But that said, the Hawks didn't really win many battles. Probably that's the biggest battle that they didn't win tonight, because field goal wise, they did pretty decent. And eventually the free throw opportunities started to come their way. But I guess at least maybe they kind of sort of won the battle of, and maybe it's just Dyson Daniels that kind of won the battle of the steals all by himself.
Sure.
But that was maybe one like bright spot that I had, like, well, they kind of sort of won one battle, and that was the battle of making sure that they were at least able to get 10 steals to the Lakers 4, and that at least resulted in some extra possessions for them maybe down the stretch to kind of sort of keep it close. I think that was a good look for them. And I think also, we kind of talk about the pesky turnovers, only 8 for this game. So if I had to take anything away that was pseudo positive, although it did not affect the outcome ultimately, it was the fact that areas where you and I usually nitpick them, win or lose, they actually did okay at tonight.
No, I agree with that, especially from a turnover standpoint, talking about ball protection. Not to say that the Lakers are, this team that kind of hangs their hat, on the defensive side of the ball as defensive anchors or anything like that. And, when you've got, a few number 1 picks on your team being the, LA Lakers, and guys that are likely going to go down in the Hall of Fame or somewhere really close to it for Anthony Davis, I think that it says something. right? That you're able to put a little bit of pressure underneath a primary, ball handler like a LeBron and maybe some of the other guys. I know that Max Christie looks like he's kind of starting to come into his own a little bit more now versus where he was at the beginning of the season and when he first came into the league. And I've noticed this about the Atlanta Hawks, not even just in tonight's game, not even just the one against Denver, but at least like the last 3, maybe 4 games. There's been far too many times where I've just seen teams leaking out a little bit too much on the Atlanta Hawks, where the Hawks haven't really gotten back and set up into their defense or just not hustling to get back nearly enough. And I feel like that's just become an issue for them a little bit.
Hold that thought. We're going to talk a little bit about what we felt like didn't happen or maybe did happen to them on the defensive end of the court, as well as the offensive end of the court when we come back in the and one. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You want to watch to see which players will actually score a touchdown, whether that's the Saturday games or the Sunday games, how many points each team will score could be a thriller. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown. Will Kyle Pitts manage to score one more touchdown for these Atlanta Falcons before the regular season ends? How many points each team will score? Will the Falcons run up the scoreboard on the Carolina Panthers come Sunday to end the regular season and get their final regular season home game in the Benz on a high note? And you can, of course, go for so much more on FanDuel.com. So visit FanDuel.com and join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL and, of course, America's #1 sports book. All right, DeShaun, so you were kind of alluding to it earlier, so I will flip gears, and instead of starting on the offensive side of the ball, let's start on the defensive side of the ball, because you said there were certain points where you felt like maybe this defense was a little bit leaky, in particular when there was an opportunity for them to really just get back in transition. They really just didn't.
Yeah, I would see it from time to time over the course of the last 3 or 4 games where the opposition seems to just kind of, there's so many different outlet passes. And I'm used to seeing this with the Atlanta Hawks because they're one of the best teams in the NBA in terms of pace. I don't feel like I saw that much in terms of just transition defense where there were some letdowns or as many on consecutive plays. And not just in random times of the game, but just consistently from quarter to quarter and game after game. Not really sure what that's about exactly. I know we missed Dyson Daniels for, a little bit of time, maybe not much. But I know how infectious he is and everything else.
Right. And then Jalen Johnson for the last game.
And then Jalen Johnson as well. Absolutely, of course. But it just seems like it's I don't know. I guess sometimes it stuck out more like a sore thumb to me just because of the fact that that's a way that I've seen them kind of get easy baskets, force teams to make their, I call it making your money, make their money a lot harder than the Atlanta Hawks have done. The Atlanta Hawks just getting on some of those easy, quick transitions, outlet passes, things of that nature. And they seem like other teams are consistently kind of utilizing or maximizing that exact same strategy on the Atlanta Hawks, where you would think because they do that so often that they would know better and get back on defense a little bit quicker. I saw that too many instances on tonight against LA.
Yeah, and I think another thing that was a little bit troubling was just the fact that not only did the Hawks get out-rebounded, but it's the fact that they got out-rebounded on those offensive boards as well. So just those second chance point opportunities, that's always a killer when you're not hitting the shots on the other side. It's like, hey, if nothing else, make sure that you don't give a second or an extra possession or extra possessions to the opponent. And I think we saw that a little bit too much tonight. And also, like you said, in terms of just the Lakers being able to kind of get out and play the game at the speed and at the pace that they wanted to, and kind of making the Hawks play a game that worked against them, if you will. I think that's another area where it was just a little bit of a head scratcher, because I think if there's one thing for sure that you want to ensure, it's that, hey, we're not going to let you, like you said, we're going to get back in transition. So we're not going to allow you to set up anything but a half court offense. But hey, when you look back and you see, and there weren't a lot of fast break points necessarily, but there were enough fast break points and enough points in transition to show you that the Hawks weren't getting back like they should. And that the Lakers, at least, especially in the first half, it felt like there were just those moments in time, or the second quarter in particular, where they were able to just kind of run like they wanted to up and down the court. And I think too, it just felt like with the Lakers getting those points in transition, the Hawks defense, their transition defense wasn't good, especially for the starters. And like you said, Dyson Daniels, it's understandable. He's kind of getting back slowly but surely. Jalen Johnson, he's kind of getting back slowly but surely. But I feel like, okay, well, if we know that those guys aren't 100%, and that's kind of where that comes from, well, that means Zachary Risachet, you got to pick up the pace a little bit and kind of bring some help there. And off the bench, DeAndre Hunter, if your shot's not falling, that's a great opportunity for you where you'll be able to contribute. Because if your stat line is going to end, if you're ending the game with a stat line going 1 of 12, you can't also end the game with a stat line of just 3 rebounds, no steals, no blocks. So really just kind of ineffective at both ends of the court. That can't quite happen for you if your shot's not falling. But speaking of the shot not falling, like we said earlier, this was the worst offensive showing from the perimeter for the Hawks of the season. I mean, 6 of 34. They haven't had a tougher game than that. And that's one of those where you truly just say, oh, your shot's not falling, because you took them. You did what Quinn Snyder wanted you to do, which is shoot 34 times from deep. Just couldn't hit anything.
Yeah, and those were good shots. Like, we're not talking about guys that were just forcing up things or hesitating on a shot, and then the defense end up closing out, and you're always like screaming at the TV saying, why didn't you just take the first shot instead of hesitating and pump faking and then trying to swing it around that results in a turnover? Like, it seems like a lot of their shots were in rhythm. It's things that they practice. It's sets that they run on a regular basis and getting the ball to the open guy. And it's like guys just were not able to hit shots. And like you said, that's going to happen on some nights. Obviously, this being a night that it happened, I don't think that's something that's going to continue for this team. I do think that there are some times that, you definitely don't want them to fall in love with the three-pointer like we always talk about. You always want to make sure that you're, making that money. The likelihood of you making that shot versus missing it, being closer to the basket, is always better. But with that being said, even that kind of had me concerned a little bit in the first quarter, somewhat of the first half, where it looks like LA was getting pretty much any and everything they wanted to from the inside. But it's good to see that the Atlanta Hawks, being a team that can have the balance. And this is something that actually was talking about, something that did work. Having that balance of being able to get out and run, because they're one of the better teams in pace. And then also in their half-court sets, being able to dump the ball down inside. Somebody that did a fine job for himself on tonight was Onyeka Okongwu, who I think had a double-double, only missed a couple shots. But his energy looked really good. He was cleaning up around the rim. And I like to see that kind of carry over or kind of convert or translate into the next game against another LA team.
Yeah, he was definitely a big part of why the Hawks bench was able to outscore the Lakers bench 29-22, because of course he ended the game with 14 points on 7 of 12 shooting, and also contributed at the other end as well with 11 rebounds and a block. So yeah, good to see Double O back looking like his Double O self. And so hopefully it's a short turnaround. So you hate that for the Hawks, as they're coming off an already late game. Then they have to turn around and play another LA team yet again tomorrow night. And, that's going to be interesting for them. Like, how are they going to reset? But hopefully
it will.
When you look, I was going to say, hopefully when you look at the fact that DeAndre Hunter didn't exactly have his best night. The one thing that I think is positive about that is he only played 27 minutes. So hopefully he'll have some pseudo fresh legs, if you will. And we really haven't seen DeAndre Hunter have 2 horrid nights in a row. So I'm hoping that means that he's going to bounce back and be available to be his DeAndre Hunter self. But speaking of availability, there's somebody who allegedly wasn't supposed to be available. Now all of a sudden he possibly might be. And what's going on with the ASG voting? Early returns are definitely making for some head scratchers. We'll talk about it in What's Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Now, if you're like me and you love going to live events, sports, music, theater, or comedy, hey, it's a great opportunity for you to get and take advantage of the best tickets with Game Time. I mean, the energy and the excitement of a Beyonce concert is absolutely unforgettable, or one of those crazy Atlanta Hawks games where they just absolutely feed off the energy of the crowd at State Farm Arena. So Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I know for me, I found some amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying for the Bayou Classic game between Southern University and Grambling State. Now, the super deal is particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? It is game time. So I know that we have some early returns that we're going to talk about in a second for All-Star voting. Those results, of course, were released Thursday. But before we get to that, I also just want to say, just as we mentioned, that Jalen Johnson obviously missed a game, was back, and Dyson Daniels missed a couple games. He was back. They're both looking like especially Dyson Daniels, looking like he's closer to 100%. Onyeka Okongwu's looking good. But the Hawks did, in their defense, lose someone who was really starting to come up. Someone I know you had your eye on earlier in the season, and he was really producing results of recent, and that's Larry Nance Jr., who underwent surgery Thursday to repair the fractured 4th metacarpal bone in his right hand. He'll, of course, begin rehab immediately, and he'll be reevaluated in a couple of weeks. But for you, what's the biggest thing the Hawks lose with Larry out of the lineup?
By the way, a quick side note, it was good to be able to see Bogey back in action as well. That was always a positive sign. That is one of the silver lining optimism, positivity that we did see on tonight. But I think in terms of what you're missing, first of all, is just like the veteran leadership that he provides and brings to the team. He's played with this LA team around guys that are winners like LeBron and AD and some of the other guys. He's played with some of these other teams as well that have made, been consistent in terms of playoff appearances. But outside of that, I just think just another body in the front court, which I think is something that you need. He brings something a little bit different. I talked about this on the postcast a couple nights ago, where you have somebody like a Capella and an Okongwu who are primarily known for their ability to play defense, but not necessarily give you great offense. Now, I get it. Larry Nance is probably not going to bring you great offense either, but I feel like he has more of an offensive mindset and just a better balance between offense and defense than either one of those guys do. Not saying he's better than those guys, but just in general. So I just think that there's that, just adding an extra body, an extra piece, especially when there's moments where Okongwu, you're not really sure what you're going to get, whether he's going to play or not lately. Even more so what he's going to give you on the offensive side. Capella, you have a good feeling what he's going to give you on the offensive side, and that's not necessarily good either. So I just think that Nance brings just so much different and a different dynamic. I mean, not only about the athleticism that he's known for and dunking on guys and things of that nature, but even developing a sneaky little three-point shot sometimes from time to time that might kind of sneak up on you. So I think that that's just kind of like the main thing. He's He's a bigger focal point, or I guess just a bigger piece to this team than I think sometimes it even shows up on the stat sheet.
Yeah, well, when you look at the 6 games that he played in December, of course, his best game was against the San Antonio Spurs, albeit a loss in overtime for the Hawks. But he had 21 points in just 31 minutes, and he shot 62% from the field. He shot 83% from 3 and had 13 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, a steal. The reason I mention that is because it goes to your point about the capabilities. He may not always be a scoring threat, but the capability to produce is absolutely there. Another solid game against the Bulls where the Hawks actually won, 12 points in 23 minutes, 56% from the field, 50% from 3. And then, of course, the double-double against Miami this past Saturday in the Hawks win. And again, 67% from the field. Didn't only shot 1 3, but again, a nice double-double for him, just showing the versatility that he brings to the table. And that's something that I know the Hawks will miss, because you're losing that coming off the bench, giving sort of some starter energy at both ends of the court. So definitely just hope that Larry Nance can get back Larry Nance Jr. can get back for these Hawks sooner rather than later. Now, the NBA's first round of All-Star voting released Thursday. Latest sign of a transition in eras, maybe you could say, because LeBron James and Steph Curry ranked 3rd at their respective positions. Now, granted, LeBron does have a pretty big lead for that 3rd and final start over Anthony Davis and Victor Wembanyama. Curry might be on the bench for a 2nd straight year, sitting behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic. But of course, a lot of that might be dictated by what happens with Luka Doncic injury-wise. That said, those are the local head scratchers, or the national head scratchers. But DeShaun, you had a couple of local ones that you wanted to talk about that might be more about where Trae Young and Jalen Johnson are in this race for everyone to punch their tickets to San Francisco in February. So are you surprised that Trae, who's currently in 5th place in voting amongst East guards, is trailing LaMelo Ball, Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, and Jalen Brunson in that order?
Yeah, we can start with that first one being LaMelo Ball. I don't know what the infatuation is here. I'm not really sure.
I don't think anyone is.
Yeah, at all. I mean, the play style, I get it. It's probably really attractive to some of the younger generation that is probably generating a lot of the eyes on NBA basketball, especially right now until playoff hits. But I still just really, I don't know. It's just something about it I don't get. First of all, outside of that fact, you hardly ever get a chance to see the dude play because he's always injured. And I get it. He was really good at the beginning of this year, kind of kickstarting out, jumping out to a really good start on the year this year. But I don't really think fan favorite so much when I think about LaMelo Ball sometimes. And I get it with the good size and the ball handling ability, the vision and everything else that typically would go along with being a ball brother or whatever. And then I think he's just kind of got his own little swag and pizzazz to himself. But to be number 1 leading, not even just about leading over Trae Young, but leading over all guards. Some of the other stuff, okay, Donovan Mitchell, I see it with the record. Dame Dollar, like he's a veteran. He's been in this league. He's a bucket getter. He's all about offense. Some of the other guys, just the LaMelo one has just really got me shaking my head. But you know what I do? You know what I love, Tenitra? I love the idea of a Trae Young all-star snub in any type of way, whether it's about vote getting or whatever the case may be, because it just always seems like he comes back with a little something different in terms of the mentality when that happens.
Yeah, he does. He typically does. So yeah, that may be something that gives a little bit of a bounce. Should he be left off the final roster once you get through the voting, the reserves, the coaches selections, the openings, or as a result of the injuries, etc. So we shall see how it works out for him. But yeah, he's sneaky good whenever somebody, or he's alleged to not be, whether that's by fans, players, coaches, etc. But yeah, LaMelo, I think, was a head scratcher for most people in the media, because we're looking and we're like, okay, so your team is 14th in the East. Like, you're the 14th team in the East. How are you going to jump past Donovan Mitchell, whose team is in the first spot, by the way?
Right.
How are you going to jump beyond a Dame Lillard, who's been playing who's having a really solid year with the Milwaukee Bucks. And yes, they're in 5th place, but what you're seeing coming together with him and Giannis Antetokounmpo is pretty darn impressive. So that's kind of confusing. And Jalen Brunson, well, he's been still doing Jalen Brunson things. That is a part of the reason why the New York Knicks are sitting in that 3rd spot in the East. So I agree with you. I can understand the other 3 being ahead of Trey. But you will never make this make sense for me with LaMelo Ball being the top vote getter, unless you and I are having this conversation when it's all said and done, and somehow he drops down to that 4th or 5th spot, because smarter heads, wiser heads are thinking, and wiser heads prevail.
I agree with you that there's just no verbiage that can get me to understand. It's still a head scratcher and all that. It just, none of it really makes sense to me. Like, I instantly, when I saw this, Tenitra, I'm like, okay, somebody's getting fired. People are like, what are you talking about? Who's getting fired? And I'm like, this misprint that I just read, somebody's about to lose their job. And it's not like, no, like LaMelo Ball really is like the leading vote getter right now amongst guards in the Eastern Conference. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to take a second to step off to the side and go to the restroom and splash water on my face. But like, I can't believe what I'm really hearing right now. This couldn't possibly be true. And I don't anticipate that this is something that will just, ride out to be a long drawn out thing after we get to a point where the fan voting doesn't matter anymore, or outside of the fan voting and everything else like that. But I don't know. I'll be honest with you. As much of a basketball head as I am, I definitely have my own reservations and questioning amongst those that are voting and based off of what they watch in basketball in 2025.
Yeah, and you kind of are disappointed as well for what we saw with Jalen Johnson not even making the top 10 from the front court. But again, when you look at the names, it is a little bit more understandable, because jumping ahead of Giannis, Jason Tatum, Cat, Paolo Banchero, Jaylen Brown, Jimmy Butler, even though he refuses to play. But Franz Wagner has actually been having a good season. Joel Embiid, Paul George, Evan Mobley. That's kind of a tough front court to jump ahead of. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But again, for Jalen Johnson, sometimes when fans see that a guy that they know is having a banner year isn't being considered, then maybe those fans, Hawks fans, will step up and start voting and getting him into the conversation. But speaking of one more thing that's a head scratcher before we wrap up.
Okay.
The Los Angeles Clippers, whom the Hawks are playing tomorrow night, sent out the official injury report. And for those of you guys who don't know, at 9 p.m. Eastern time, the night before a game, that's when the league releases injury reports that DeShaun and I and media members can all take a look at. Heck, if you guys Google it, you probably can too. But that said, the Clippers initially ruled Kawhi Leonard as out. That report actually literally refreshes itself like every hour, if you will. All of a sudden, we look at the report tonight and we see Kawhi Leonard's been upgraded to questionable. That really does bother me, because at the end of the day, if you've been ruled out, dang it, be ruled out, and let's just keep it pushing. I don't like the fact that the league allows that to happen.
Yeah, I don't either, Tenitra. And the crazy part is I remember hearing something, which is probably almost 7 days ago now, where I had been hearing some rumblings about Kawhi Leonard making a return. And if he was to make the return, the most likely time that he would do it would end up being against the Atlanta Hawks on tomorrow. Yet still, I don't know. It's just the NBA ruling thing sometimes always kind of confuses me to some degree. And they have their own set of issues and things that they're dealing with. It's trying to, you're not just going to instantly be able to take a guy who hasn't played in what feels like forever to just plug and play and get into the system. And then he doesn't have to worry about getting back into game shape and everything else. We haven't seen this guy on the floor as of yet. And I'm looking, you know what? I hope that he plays, because I don't want there to be any excuses from those Clippers fans. Not that there's a ton, but any excuses from those Clippers fans when I start hearing things, about how the Atlanta Hawks took care of business against the Clippers tomorrow.
Yeah, we shall see. And we hope that the Hawks rather do take advantage of and don't have any issues with getting a dub against this LA Clippers team and hopefully getting back to 500 on their road trip. Locked On Sports Atlanta is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.